a former advisor to U.S. President Donald Trump, has been sentenced to 3 years and 4 months in prison. Roger Stone was convicted last year of lying to Congress, witness tampering, and obstructing the investigation into whether Trump's campaign colluded with Russia. He's also been ordered to pay a fine of $20,000. Let's go live to our White House correspondent Kimberly Halkett for more on this. Kimberly, that sentence that's been handed down, much shorter than the suggested sentence. Why is this?
Well, it's certainly notable, and Judge Amy Berman Jackson did say that she took both the initial recommendation of 7 to 9 years, as well as the revised recommendation from Department of Justice prosecutors into account. It's notable that she has struck a sentence somewhere in the middle, as you pointed out there, 40 months or 3 years, 4 months, as well as a 24-month probation period and a $20,000 fine. The judge in this case had a lot to say about how she came to her decision on that sentence. She said that Roger Stone has not been prosecuted for standing up for President Trump, but instead for covering up for the president. She pointed to the fact that he had lied to congressional investigators, she said, when he said that he had no contact with one of the witnesses. She called that a flat-out lie. In fact, noting that there were documented up to 1,500 texts and emails of communication. She also went on to say that he brought this on himself, that he inserted himself smack into the middle of one of the most incendiary issues of the day, namely the investigation by Robert Mueller into whether or not Donald Trump's presidential campaign had colluded with Russia. So she did take into account, she said, a number of letters from his friends and family who had requested leniency. But in the end, she said that there were many things that Roger Stone had done himself that she could not ignore, including the fact that he posted on Instagram a picture of the judge next to a rifle scope and crosshairs.
Okay,
she
Kimberly,
said to
we're just
ignore
seeing
this would simply
Roger Stone
be intolerable in the administration of justice. Yes, I'm also watching the monitor as well as we continue to talk. And just to be clear, that very last point I said was rather important. It was essentially that she felt she had to make this sentence because to not do so would be intolerable to the administration of justice. This was a very angry judge as she issued this sentence. And as we watch these pictures, you can see there Roger Stone, a lot of media interest about this case, getting into what looks like an SUV with a lot of security. This is a man who has been at the heart of a lot of controversy, making serious allegations against this judge, as I pointed out, not only posting on social media, but also many of the supporters of President Trump, you really seeing him as a person who has been a victim of what they say is a politically loaded case. They point to the fact that the judge had been appointed by the former Democratic President Barack Obama. She dismissed all of this, and many of her supporters in the legal community also saying that when it comes to a sentence, it comes down to strict sentencing guidelines. And we see there Roger Stone driving away. But that's not the end of what we likely will hear from Roger Stone. In fact, there had been a gag order in this case. I believe it has been lifted. In fact, the judge even saying that she expects that Roger Stone will have more to say about this case. She said, I expect he will keep talking.
Quite. Kimberly, this has been, it's been quite a case that has been quite politicised, shall we say, perhaps because of the connections Roger Stone has to the current US president. He has, of course, been reacting throughout the trial and throughout this suggested sentence being released. Has there been any reaction at all to the sentence that's been handed down from the White House?
You are absolutely right when you say that Roger Stone's connected. He's been a friend of President Trump's for more than 3 decades, some 35 years. And in fact, the president did weigh in, and that's what resulted in the initial downgrading of the recommended sentence. The president called the recommended sentence a miscarriage of justice. That's when the attorney general presumably weighed in, and the prosecutors came up with a new sentencing recommendation. It appears the judge has gone somewhere down the middle, but the president has been very vocal about this case. In fact, one of the things he said this morning in a tweet was, they say Roger Stone lied to Congress. Oh, I see. So did Comey. He's referring to the former FBI Director James Comey. He goes on to say FBI, exclamation point, fairness, question mark. What he's insinuating is that everybody lies to Congress, and why is this bad and not for another individual? So expect that the president may have something to say about this. He has been doing a bit of a West Coast tour, and we expect that he may have something to say at a rally when he speaks later on, some hours from now, in Colorado. But the bottom line is the judge addressed the highly partisan nature of this case, saying that if Roger Stone goes unpunished, it will not be a victory for any one party. She said in the midst of all of this, everyone loses.
OK, Kimberly Halkett there, live for us outside the White House. For now, thank you very much indeed. Let's just remind our viewers of who Roger Stone is and why he is so critical. Well, he's worked with Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush and George W. Bush, but it's his role in Donald Trump's campaign which has landed him in court. In the run-up to the 2016 election, he tried to launch a smear campaign against Hillary Clinton using the website WikiLeaks. He was questioned about that last year during the Mueller investigation, and he lied, threatened another witness to do the same, and hid documents from investigators in that probe. Prosecutors said his crimes warranted up to 9 years in prison. But that, as we were hearing from Kimberly, was overruled by Attorney General William Barr shortly after tweets issued by President Trump. Now, all four prosecutors quit after that decision, which many are calling a blatant pressure from the White House. Well, let's get more now from Claire Finkelstein. She's the faculty director for the Centre of Ethics and the Rule of Law at the University of Pennsylvania Law School. Good to have you with us again on the News Hour. Let's take a look at this sentence so far. Is it in line with these kind of crimes? Do you think justice has been served?
Well, it's important to notice that the sentence was 40 months, which is smack dab in the middle of the second recommendation that the Justice Department made, namely the recommendation that occurred after the president tweeted and William Barr stepped in and required his prosecutors to issue another sentencing memo. Their recommendation was 37 to 46 months, which was a huge reduction from the sentence that was originally presented by the prosecutors. And the judge in this case said that she thought that the original memo suggesting up to 9 years in prison was really too harsh, despite the fact that she seemed to agree with all the enhancing factors that increased the sentence and was the basis for the original recommendation. The question then is whether or not, despite her strong stance on this and the willingness of this judge to stand up to President Trump, as seen by her sentence of Paul Manafort, whether or not she was, in fact, influenced by the controversy surrounding this case and the pressure that the president has been putting on both her and on the Justice Department to be lenient with regard to his pal, Roger Stone.
Well, this is perhaps the critical issue, is it not? That now nobody can have confidence in whatever sentence is handed down by this judge, or indeed any judge. I mean, are we now to question the motives of judges in the United States?
Well, she's been a very fair and very law and order judge. After all, what she did in the face of the pressure with regard to Paul Manafort was incredibly brave. She took a lot of heat for it, and she's been under constant pressure from this administration. She also has a long history of being a fair, reliable, and very careful judge. She gave a long speech today explaining that her sentence was not influenced by political factors, and she was very, very strong in rejecting both the president's behavior and Roger Stone's behavior, which really went to the heart of the kind of obstructive conduct that we see on a regular basis from this president. Roger Stone had, in the very trial itself, ignored repeated orders from her. For example, he ignored a gag order, and in the face of that gag order, continued to tweet about it. He also attempted to intimidate a witness by threatening to kill his dog. This kind of behavior really infects a trial and suggests that if it's allowed to stand, that it is not possible to achieve justice. So by taking a strong stance against this kind of obstruction, she did score points for the rule of law. But the question is whether or not the sentence was really harsh enough to reflect the enhancements that were validated by this kind of conduct.
OK, Claire Finkelstein, great to get your thoughts. Thank you so much for joining us there from the University of Pennsylvania Law School.